The wind knifed down from the bitter roots, rattling cottonwoods and lonely bones. A rider kept his seat against it, eyes fixed on the dark line of mountains and whatever waited there. In that dusk, a young Apache woman stood calm before a black stallion nobody could ride. Her voice was barely a breath. "If you mount me, cowboy, I'll belong to you forever." Cole Brennan knew the Montana wind carried more than weather. It carried news, and news could tighten a noose around a man's ranch faster than any rope. His spread, tucked in a valley near a one-street town called Cedar, was all he had left. That, and his 10-year-old girl, June. She had her mother's freckles and a way of seeing right through a man. June was why he worked till his bones ached. And she was why the banker's letter in his pocket felt like a tombstone. Payment due by the first snows, the ink stiff as judgment. His herd had been spooked, scattered by a busted fence and a devil of a stallion named Night Drift, black as sin, quick as a flash flood, and meaner than a rattler in a boot. If Cole couldn't break Night Drift to lead the fall drive, the money would run out. And winter in Montana never forgave a man who was broke. Hope was a word he'd nearly forgotten. But then the wind shifted, and with it came whispers. Talk of a horse, gentler, new to the valley. An Apache woman who rode like she was part of the horse, a woman who could make devils kneel. Cole didn't chase rumors. He was a man who trusted his own two hands and nothing else. But that evening, June tugged his coat. "Pa," she said, her eyes wide. "Mr. Harland at the livery says she's real, says she made his meanest gelding stand still with just a touch." Cole grunted. "Stories." "She's Apache, Pa," June whispered, the word hanging heavy in the air. That explained the whispers. Folks around Cedar didn't forget the wars. Cole carried no hate, but he knew a lone Apache woman would be trouble for some. Still, if she could gentle Night Drift, it was a chance. It was the only chance he had. By dusk, he rode out toward the river bend, June perched in front of him. They saw the thin curl of smoke. And then they saw her. She was standing with the stallion himself, Night Drift. The horse's black hide quivered, his hooves tearing chunks from the earth. Most men wouldn't get within 50 feet. She stood so close she could touch him. Her hand was lifted, and she was whispering, her voice a low hum Cole couldn't understand. The stallion tossed his massive head, teeth bared in a silent scream. And then, the impossible happened. He went still. His ears twitched, listening. Cole swung down from his saddle, setting June on the ground. "That horse will kill you," he called out, his voice rough. The woman turned. She was younger than he'd thought, with hair as black as the stallion's coat and eyes like chips of obsidian. "He listens," she said. Her voice was soft, but it carried, steady as the river flowing behind her. Cole stepped closer, his hand near the pistol on his hip. "You're the one they're talking about." She didn't smile. "People talk too much. You are Cole Brennan, a rancher." He was a man not easily rattled, but her knowing his name did just that. "And you are Ayanna," she said, her gaze direct, without a hint of fear. "You have need. I have skill." Before Cole could form a reply, June piped up. "Can you really ride him?" Ayanna's lips curved just a fraction. "Not yet. He will choose. If he lets me mount him, it will be forever. That is our way." Cole frowned. Forever. He didn't need oaths and spirits. He needed a broke horse. But the way Night Drift stood near her, the trembling in his muscles seeming to ease under her gaze, he couldn't deny what he was seeing. "You'll take pay," he said gruffly. "Room and board. Coin, if you manage it." Ayanna's dark eyes flicked from him to June, who was watching her with open curiosity. "I do not want your coins." That stopped him cold. Then what in God's name did she want? She looked past him, at the ranch that wasn't yet his, at the mountains that held the coming snow. A place, she said softly. A roof and respect, that is all. Cole felt the banker's letter pressing against his ribs. Pride warred with desperation. He looked at the impossible woman and the impossible horse. You break that stallion, he said, the words feeling like a prayer and a curse, and you'll have both. The wind picked up, carrying the scent of rain. Night drift snorted, stamping the ground. Ayana's hand rose again, steady and sure. And for the first time in 2 long years, Cole Brennan felt something other than grief crack open inside him. It felt half like hope and half like pure, uncut danger. Morning came sharp and cold. Cole saddled his horse in the pre-dawn gray, half expecting Ayana to be gone, a ghost from the riverbank. But she was there, standing by the corral, her dark hair in a single tight braid, her eyes already locked on Night Drift. The stallion was a storm of muscle and fury inside the rails, circling, kicking, snorting defiance at the new day. Ayana just leaned on the top rail, whispering those same low words he couldn't understand. It sounded ancient, like a song the mountains themselves might sing. You plan to talk him into behaving? Cole asked, his tone laced with a skepticism he couldn't hide. She didn't even look at him. He listens. He waits. He is proud. He's a devil, Cole grunted, swinging down. Just then, June came running from the house, her boots kicking up dust. She scrambled onto the fence right next to Ayana, her small hands gripping the rough wood. Can I watch? Ayana finally turned her head, her obsidian eyes studying the girl for a long moment. Then, a nod. You may watch, but stay back. His wildness is still afire. June nodded, her expression solemn, as if she'd been given a sacred trust. Cole felt a pang in his chest, watching his daughter so readily accept this stranger. Ayana slipped through the rails into the corral. She moved with a slow, deliberate grace that was mesmerizing. She carried no rope, no whip. She just walked toward the furious animal with a patience Cole had never witnessed in his life. Night Drift lunged, hooves slashing the air, a blur of black violence. Ayana simply pivoted, fluid as water, never flinching, never taking her eyes off him. She's gonna get herself killed, Cole breathed, his hand tightening on the fence rail. No, Pa, June whispered, her voice full of awe. Look, he's listening to her. And damn it all if the girl wasn't right. The stallion's ears were swiveling, tracking Ayana's every move. His body still screamed rage, but his eyes were locked on her. Cole felt a knot of resentment and wonder tighten in his gut. He'd spent months fighting that horse, trying to break its will with force. And this woman was commanding it with nothing but silence. By noon, the stallion's coat was slick with sweat. He still hadn't let her touch him, but he hadn't charged again either. He circled her, a black planet orbiting a silent sun. That was more progress than Cole had made in a year. That night at supper, June was a whirlwind of questions. Where did you learn that? Do you have Apache stories? Will you tell me one? Ayana answered some, letting others fade into the quiet of the room. She ate slowly, as if each bite was a victory. Cole watched her in the flickering lamplight, her face a canvas of shadow and light. When June was finally asleep, he and Ayana sat by the dying fire. She was mending a piece of tack, her fingers nimble and sure. You handle leather well, he offered, just to break the silence. She didn't look up from her work. My father was a saddler. He taught me that impatient hands break what they are trying to fix. The words landed closer to home than she could have known. Cole shifted. You said you wanted a place. Why here? Why my ranch? Her hands stilled. She lifted her eyes, and they were like flint striking steel. Because you have a horse that everyone else fears, she said, and because your daughter does not fear me. The truth of it sat between them, heavy and undeniable. He'd hired her to break a horse, but Cole was starting to suspect that something else, something much bigger, was happening on his ranch. He just didn't know what it was yet. The next few days, a cold snap froze the valley solid. Cole worked himself to the bone, trying to keep his mind off the woman who moved through his home like a quiet spirit. Ayanna was relentless. Every morning she was at the corral, and every day Nightdrift gave up a little more of his fury. He began to allow her to brush his flank, his powerful muscles quivering, but not striking out. June became her shadow, learning to braid rawhide, to read the stories written in the snow. Cole watched his daughter's smile return, brighter than it had been since her mother died. He told himself it was good for the girl, but a part of him felt a pull toward Ayanna that was as strong and dangerous as the stallion in the corral. One evening, he was fixing a hinge in the barn. He saw her lift a heavy saddle, her movements strong and sure. He watched her for too long, and she turned and caught his eye. Across the dusty, lamplit air, something crackled between them, a spark of heat in the frozen winter. Cole turned away, his heart hammering, cursing himself for a fool. He was a man who had locked his heart in a grave. He couldn't afford to feel anything, but this woman was chipping away at the stone. Sunday rolled around, and it seemed half the town of Cedar had come out to the ranch. They lined the corral fence, men spitting tobacco juice, women whispering behind their gloves. The whispers were ugly. Brennan's lost his mind. That's an Apache squaw, not a horse tamer. She'll get what's coming to her. Cole's jaw was a hard line of granite. Let them talk. Inside the corral, Ayanna moved toward the stallion. The crowd went silent. Nightdrift pawed the ground, his breath pluming in the icy air. She reached out a hand, slowly, her eyes never leaving his. She touched his neck. A collective gasp went through the crowd. Then, like a prayer being answered, the great horse lowered his head, his nostrils flaring softly against her palm. Cole felt the air leave his own lungs. Pride, sharp and fierce, surged through him. He glanced at June, and her face was shining. The town folks' muttering changed, their scorn turning to a grudging, baffled respect. Cole stood a little taller, and his eyes met Ayanna's across the corral. In that moment, the crowd, the cold, the debt, it all fell away. There was only the broken man and the woman who could gentle wild things. And in the back of his mind, a dangerous thought took root. Maybe this wasn't just about the horse anymore. But then he saw it. As Ayanna stroked Nightdrift's powerful neck, the horse shifted, and a patch of hair near his mane parted. Underneath, scarred deep into the black hide, was a brand. It wasn't Cole's brand. It wasn't from any ranch he knew in the territory. It was a strange, jagged symbol, like a lightning strike. And beside him, he heard a sharp intake of breath. It wasn't June. It was Mr. Harland, the livery owner. His face had gone pale as a sheet. "My God," Harland whispered, so low only Cole could hear. "I've seen that brand before." Cole turned to him, a cold dread seeping into his bones. "Where?" Harland wouldn't meet his eyes. He just shook his head and backed away from the fence, melting into the crowd. But the look on his face wasn't respect. It was pure terror. Suddenly, the miraculous taming of the horse felt less like a blessing and more like a sign. A sign that the real trouble hadn't even started yet, and that whatever storm was coming, Ayanna and her devil horse were right in the center of it. That night, a blizzard swept down from the mountains, burying the valley in a sea of white. Inside the small ranch house, the fire crackled, a lone bastion of warmth against the howling wind. June was asleep, but Cole and Ayanna sat in the flickering light, the silence between them thick with unspoken things. Cole couldn't get the image of that strange brand out of his head, or the fear on Harlan's face. "That brand on the stallion," he said finally, his voice low. "I've never seen it." Ayanna's hands, which were mending one of June's dresses, went still. She didn't look at him. "It is not a rancher's mark." Her voice was carefully neutral, but Cole could hear the tension in it. Then what is it? He pressed. She finally looked up, her dark eyes reflecting the firelight. It is the mark of a man who takes what is not his. A man who deals in stolen horses and lost lives. A chill that had nothing to do with the blizzard outside ran down Cole's spine. You know this man? She gave a slow, deliberate nod. His name is Silas Croft. Cole felt his blood run cold. Silas Croft, the banker, the man who held the note on his ranch, the man whose ink was as stiff as judgment. It made no sense. Croft was a man of ledgers and contracts, not brands and stolen horses. The banker? Cole asked, disbelief heavy in his voice. He is more than a banker, Ayanna said, her voice dropping to a near whisper. He was a captain in the army, the one who led the raid on my people's winter camp 2 years ago. They burned our lodges, took our supplies, and drove off our finest horses. Night Drift. He was my brother's horse. Croft took him too. The room seemed to shrink, the air growing thin. The pieces began to fall into place with sickening clarity. Croft wasn't just trying to collect a debt. He wanted the horse. He wanted the evidence of his crimes silenced, and Cole's ranch was now ground zero. He knows the horse is here, Cole said, more to himself than to her. The whole town saw it today. He must have been there. He was, Ayanna confirmed. I saw him. His face. It was the same as the day he watched our homes burn. Suddenly the threat wasn't just a faceless bank in Missoula. It had a name and a face, and it was right here in Cedar. Croft didn't just want his land. He wanted to bury his past, and Ayanna was living, breathing proof of what he'd done. The weight of the banker's letter in his coat felt different now. It wasn't just a debt. It was a weapon. Croft was using it to squeeze him, to force him off the land so he could reclaim the horse and the secret it carried. And Cole Brennan, a simple rancher trying to save his family, had just stumbled into the middle of a war he never knew was being fought. The howling of the wind outside sounded like a warning. He sent them, Cole said, the words tasting like ash in his mouth. The storm that busted my fence, the one that scattered my herd. It wasn't a storm, was it? It was him, driving Night Drift onto my land. Ayanna nodded, her eyes dark with a grief that looked ancient. He lost the horse in the mountains during the raid. He must have been tracking him ever since. He used your trouble to create an opportunity for himself, to get the horse back without anyone knowing it was his. Cole stood up and paced the small room, his mind racing. He was caught in a trap, and the jaws were closing. Croft held his debt. He had the law on his side, at least on paper. And now he had a reason to get rid of not just the horse, but Ayanna, too. What do we do? He asked, the question hanging in the air. For the first time, he wasn't just asking for help with a horse. He was asking for an ally. Ayanna rose and walked to the window, peering out into the swirling snow. We do not run, she said, her voice filled with a quiet, unshakable resolve. This is my brother's horse. This is my story to finish. And this is your home. We fight. In that moment, looking at her determined profile against the raging storm, Cole felt the last of his carefully built walls crumble. He wasn't just fighting for his ranch anymore. He was fighting for her. He was fighting for the family that was unexpectedly, impossibly, forming within these wooden walls. He walked to stand beside her, their shoulders almost touching. Then we fight, he echoed. Outside, the blizzard raged, but inside the small ranch house, a different kind of storm was gathering. A storm of defiance, a storm of justice. And Cole knew, with a certainty that settled deep in his soul, that winter had just declared war. The blizzard broke after 2 days, leaving the world pristine and silent. But the peace was a lie. Every shadow seemed to hold a threat. Every gust of wind sounded like approaching riders. Cole and Ayanna moved with a new shared purpose. They were no longer just a rancher and a horse tamer. They were soldiers in a silent war. The first move came not from a rifle, but from a man in a clean suit. Sheriff Brody rode out from Cedar, his face grim. "Cole," he said, dismounting by the porch. "Got a wire from the bank. Mr. Croft is calling in your note. Effective immediately." Cole's gut clenched. "He can't do that. I have until the first snows." "The first snows have come and gone, Cole," Brody said, not unkindly. "The contract's clear. He's within his rights. He's filing for foreclosure. Says he'll have the deed by the end of the week." It was a death sentence. Croft wasn't just trying to scare him. He was making his final move. "He wants the horse, Sheriff," Cole said, his voice low and tight. "There's more to this than a simple debt." Brody sighed, shifting his weight. "Look, Cole, I've known you a long time, but Croft's got the law on his side. My hands are tied. He also filed a claim for a stolen stallion, a black one. Says it bears his private mark." The trap was sprung. Croft was using the law to steal the horse back in plain sight. He would foreclose on the ranch, take possession of everything on it, including Night Drift, and Ayana's story would be buried along with Cole's dreams. "You have 3 days, Cole," the sheriff said, his eyes full of pity. "Then I have to come out here and serve the papers." As Brody rode away, Ayana stepped out onto the porch. She had heard everything. Her face was a mask of calm, but her eyes were burning. "He will not win," she said. It wasn't a hope. It was a vow. "How?" Cole demanded, desperation clawing at him. "He has the law, the money, the power." "He has a secret," she replied, "and secrets are a weakness. His crime is not just the horse. When they raided our camp, they didn't just steal horses. They stole silver, sacred ornaments, passed down through generations. My father was a silversmith. Croft and his men took it all. He would not have sold it. He would have hidden it. A man like that is greedy. He would keep his treasure close." Cole stared at her, a wild idea beginning to form. "Close? How close?" "He wants this land, Cole Brennan," Ayana said, her gaze sweeping over the valley. "He drove the horse here for a reason. Why this place? Perhaps. His treasure is already here." It was insane, a ghost story, a desperate gamble. But it was all they had. The idea that Silas Croft, the meticulous banker, had buried stolen Apache silver somewhere on his land. It was the only thing that could turn the tables. If they could find it, they would have proof. They would have leverage. They would have justice. 3 days, Cole said, the words feeling like a countdown to his own execution. He looked from Ayana's determined face to the vast, snow-covered landscape. They were looking for a needle in a haystack, a silver needle buried under a mountain of snow and lies, and the clock was ticking. Their search began at dawn. It was a hopeless task. The snow was deep, the land vast. Where would a man like Croft hide a treasure? "Think like him," Ayana said, her breath fogging in the frigid air as they stood near the river bend. "He is arrogant. He believes he is untouchable. He would hide it somewhere he could see it, somewhere that reminded him of his power." They scanned the landscape. The cottonwoods along the river, the rocky outcrops on the foothills, the old abandoned line shack at the edge of the property. Every landmark was a possibility, and every possibility was a dead end. They dug until their hands were raw, and their backs screamed in protest. The sun crawled across the sky, marking the slow death of their first day. Nothing. As dusk fell, they stood defeated by the corral. Night Drift watched them, his intelligent eyes seeming to understand their desperation. "We're running out of time," Cole said, his voice flat. June came out of the house wrapped in a thick coat. She'd been quiet all day, watching them with worried eyes. "Pa," she said, holding something out in her mitten-clad hand. "I found this." It was a rock, a smooth gray river stone, but etched into its surface was a crude drawing, a jagged line like a lightning strike next to a symbol of a tree with a broken branch. Cole stared at it. The lightning strike. It was the same symbol as the brand on Night Drift. "Where did you find this, June?" he asked, his heart starting to hammer against his ribs. "Down by the river," she said, "near the big old cottonwood, the one that got hit by lightning last summer. It has a big broken branch." Ayanna took the stone, her fingers tracing the etching. A flicker of understanding, of memory, crossed her face. "The ghost tree," she whispered. "My people have stories about it, a place where the worlds touch." They raced toward the river, hope a wildfire in their chests. The old cottonwood stood like a skeletal giant against the twilight sky, one of its largest branches shattered and hanging down. The snow around its base was deep, untouched. They started digging. Frantically, with shovels and bare hands, they tore at the frozen ground. The air was biting cold, their breath coming in ragged gasps. For what felt like an eternity, there was nothing but frozen dirt and roots. Cole was about to give up, to let the despair finally swallow him, when his shovel struck something hard, not a rock. It made a dull, metallic thud. Working together, they cleared the snow and dirt. It was an old army footlocker, rusted, but solid. Cole's heart pounded so hard he thought it would break. With a crowbar from the barn, he pried the lid open. The hinges groaned in protest, and then broke. And there, nestled in rotting canvas, was the silver. Intricately worked bracelets, necklaces, medallions, all gleaming softly in the fading light. It was a treasure trove of stolen history, of stolen life. And on top of it all was a leather-bound ledger. Cole opened it. Inside, in Silas Croft's perfect, precise handwriting, was a detailed accounting of every stolen item, every horse taken, every illegal transaction he had ever made. It was a confession, written in the neat, arrogant hand of a man who believed he would never be caught. They had him. They had the proof. But as they looked up from the chest, their victory was short-lived. Silhouetted against the rising moon on the ridge above them were 3 riders. It was Croft, and he hadn't come alone. He had seen them. He knew his secret was out, and he had come to bury it once and for all, along with anyone who had seen it. "Get June back to the house," Cole hissed, shoving the heavy ledger into Ayanna's hands. "Barricade the door. Don't come out, no matter what you hear." Ayanna's eyes met his, fierce and unafraid. "We fight together." "Not this time," Cole said, his voice raw. "He's not just here for the silver. He's here for you. Keep her safe. That's an order." For a heartbeat, she resisted, but then she saw the desperate plea in his eyes. She grabbed June's hand and ran toward the house, the ledger clutched to her chest. Cole grabbed his rifle from his saddle. 3 of them. One of him. The odds were long, but he wasn't just defending land anymore. He was defending a family. Croft and his 2 hired guns rode slowly down the ridge, their figures casting long, monstrous shadows in the moonlight. "Brennan!" Croft's voice boomed across the snow-covered valley, dripping with false cordiality. "I believe you have something that belongs to me. Let's not make this unpleasant." Cole took cover behind the massive trunk of the ghost tree, resting his rifle on a sturdy root. "It was never yours to begin with, Croft," he yelled back. "It's over." Croft laughed, a cold, empty sound. "Over? My dear man, it's just beginning. I'll have my property, I'll have my horse, and I'll have the satisfaction of seeing your pathetic little homestead burn to the ground." A shot rang out, and a bullet splintered the bark just inches from Cole's head. The fight was on. Cole returned fire, the crack of his rifle echoing through the silent night. He was a good shot, but they had the high ground and the numbers. He was pinned down. Another shot kicked up snow near his feet. They were trying to flush him out. He knew he couldn't stay here. He needed a better position. He needed to even the odds. Just as one of Croft's men broke from cover, trying to circle around him, a blur of motion exploded from the direction of the barn. It was Night Drift. Someone had opened the corral gate. The stallion charged across the field, a force of pure, untamed fury, his eyes wild in the moonlight. He wasn't just a horse. He was a weapon, a specter of vengeance. He slammed into the flank of the hired gun's horse, sending the man tumbling into the snow. One down. Croft stared, his face a mask of disbelief and rage. "That horse was supposed to be mine!" he screamed, raising his pistol to fire at the stallion. But that moment of distraction was all Cole needed. He bolted from behind the tree, running low, and dove behind a rocky outcrop closer to the barn. Now he had a clearer line of fire. He sighted on the second gunman and squeezed the trigger. The man cried out and clutched his shoulder, his rifle falling from his grasp. Two down. Now it was just him and Croft. Croft, consumed with rage, spurred his horse directly toward Cole, firing his pistol wildly. Cole stayed low, the bullets whining over his head. It was a mad charge, born of desperation. He had one shot left before he'd have to reload. He took a deep breath, let it out slow, and aimed not for the man, but for the horse. It was a cruel shot, but it was the only one he had. His rifle bucked against his shoulder. Croft's horse screamed and went down, throwing the banker violently into a snowdrift. Cole was on his feet in an instant, rifle reloaded, closing the distance. He found Croft struggling to get up, his leg bent at an unnatural angle. His arrogance was gone, replaced by the pathetic primal fear of a cornered animal. Cole stood over him, the barrel of his rifle pointed squarely at Croft's chest. "It's over," Cole said, his voice cold as the steel of his gun. From the house, the door creaked open. Ayanna emerged holding a lantern high. She walked slowly, deliberately, toward them, the ledger still in her hand. She stopped beside Cole, her gaze fixed on the broken man in the snow. "You took my brother," she said, her voice quiet, but carrying the weight of years of pain. "You took my people's past. Now, you will answer for it." Croft just whimpered, his reign of terror ending not with a bang, but with the pathetic cry of a coward. The fight for the ranch was over. The fight for justice had just been won. Spring came to the valley not as a gentle thaw, but as a cleansing flood. The snow melted, the river swelled, and the land was washed clean. With the ledger as undeniable proof, Silas Croft's empire of deceit crumbled. His crimes, once hidden in the shadows, were brought into the harsh light of day. He lost the bank, his reputation, and his freedom. The debt on Cole's ranch was erased, the foreclosure notice becoming nothing more than a bad memory. But the real change happened not in a courtroom, but in the heart of the small homestead. The whispers in Cedar turned from suspicion to awe. The story of the Apache horsewoman, the avenging stallion, and the rancher who wouldn't back down became a local legend. Respect, hard-earned and sealed in conflict, was finally given. One bright April morning, Cole Brennan stood outside the small clapboard church, tugging at a collar that felt far too tight. June, in a simple blue dress, danced around him, her hands full of wildflowers. "Do you think she'll like them, Pa?" He smiled, a real smile that reached his eyes. "She'll like them more than all the silver in the world." The church doors opened, and Ayanna walked in. She wore a simple white dress, her dark hair braided with a blue ribbon June had given her. She walked toward him, her gaze steady and true. They stood before the preacher, not as a rancher and a horse-tamer, but as two halves of a whole, forged in the fires of winter. Their vows were simple, honest words, promises meant to withstand blizzards and droughts. When the preacher pronounced them man and wife, June slipped her hand into Ayanna's, a wide grin on her face. The three of them stood together, a family born not of blood, but of courage and loyalty. That evening, they sat on the porch of the ranch house. The sun bled gold and purple across the mountains. In the pasture, Night Drift grazed peacefully, his wild spirit still intact, but now harnessed to a purpose, to a home. June, already calling Ayanna Ma, leaned her head against her shoulder, fast asleep. Cole reached over and took his wife's hand, his calloused fingers lacing through hers. "This land will test us," he murmured. She turned to him, the quiet fire in her eyes now a warm, steady glow. "Yes," she said, "but together we will endure." The wind stirred, carrying the scent of pine and new grass, and for the first time, when Cole heard it, he didn't hear loneliness. He heard a promise, a future. With his daughter safe and his wife by his side, Cole Brennan knew that here, in the heart of the unforgiving frontier, he had found his forever. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to hit that subscribe button and ring the bell so you never miss another tale from the untamed West. And let us know in the comments below what you think Croft's final fate should be. Your support helps us keep these stories alive. Thank you for listening.